The taxi was late, but Daniel Cross didn't mind. For once, time wasn't chasing him. He stood in the quiet courtyard, surrounded by tall buildings that reflected his success back at him like cold mirrors. The morning air carried the faint smell of rain and concrete, and somewhere nearby, a door slammed shut. Daniel checked his phone, then locked the screen, letting out a slow breath. He had built his life on control, every decision calculated, every risk measured. Emotions were things he had trained himself to ignore. Then his world shifted. From the far side of the courtyard, a woman appeared, walking toward the gate with a small boy at her side. At first, Daniel noticed only the gentle way she leaned down to speak to him, her hand firmly wrapped around his tiny fingers. But something about her movement felt familiar, like a memory tugging at his chest. His heart skipped when she stepped into clearer light. It was her. The years hadn't erased her presence, they had only reshaped it. Her face looked more tired but stronger somehow, like someone who had learned to carry weight without complaint. She smiled down at the child, adjusting his backpack as he stumbled slightly. The boy laughed, bright and fearless, and the sound struck Daniel harder than any boardroom loss ever had. He couldn't look away. The child lifted his head, curious eyes scanning the courtyard, eyes that mirrored Daniel's own. Same color. Same intensity. Even the way the boy tilted his head felt painfully familiar. Daniel's breath caught. His carefully ordered life cracked in a single moment. The woman looked up. Their eyes met. Shock flickered across her face before she masked it, instinctively pulling the boy closer. The world seemed to pause, sound draining away until all Daniel could hear was his own heartbeat. The child studied him openly, then spoke with innocent certainty. "Mom, that man looks like me." The words hit like a storm. Daniel had come downstairs expecting nothing more than a ride. Instead, he stood face to face with a truth he had never prepared for, a past he thought he had left behind, now holding his hand and walking toward a kindergarten gate. The woman tightened her grip on the boy's hand, her shoulders straightening as if she were silently bracing herself. Daniel noticed the small movement immediately. It wasn't fear, it was protection. That realization unsettled him more than the shock itself. She stepped slightly in front of the child, blocking Daniel without making it obvious, and forced a polite calm into her voice. "We're running late," she said, nodding toward the gate. "Late." The word echoed in Daniel's mind, sharp and cruel. Late for school. Late for a life he hadn't known existed. Late for everything that suddenly mattered more than contracts and numbers ever had. He swallowed, searching for words that wouldn't sound empty, but his throat felt tight, as if years of unspoken truths had lodged there all at once. The boy tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, is he a friend?" Daniel flinched at the word. "Friend." He lowered himself slightly, trying not to appear intimidating, his voice softer than it had been in years. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The child grinned, proud and unafraid. "Evan. I'm big now." Something twisted inside Daniel's chest. Big. The boy stood straighter, clearly believing it, and Daniel wondered how many moments like this he had already missed. He glanced at the small backpack resting against the boy's back, covered in bright shapes and tiny animals. It felt unreal, like a scene from another life unfolding right in front of him. She avoided his gaze, focusing on smoothing the boy's hair. "We really should go," she said, firmer now. Daniel straightened. "How old is he?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Her hand paused. Just for a second. "4," she replied quietly. "Almost." The numbers aligned with brutal precision. Daniel felt his breath grow shallow. He wasn't a man easily shaken, but this was different. This wasn't a deal gone wrong. This was a life quietly built without him. "I didn't know," he said, the words raw and honest. She finally looked at him then, her eyes tired but steady. "You chose not to," she replied softly. "You chose a different future." The boy looked between them, sensing something he couldn't name. Daniel realized with a sudden clarity that this moment was not about his shock, it was about what he would do next. Silence settled between them, heavy and uncomfortable, broken only by the distant hum of traffic beyond the gates. Daniel searched her face not for blame but for understanding. He saw exhaustion there and something deeper, resolve built from years of standing alone. This was not the woman he had left behind chasing certainty. This was someone who had learned to survive without it. "I wasn't ready back then," Daniel said slowly. "I thought waiting would protect us all." She let out a quiet breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Waiting doesn't protect anyone," she replied. "It just delays the cost." The boy shifted his weight, clearly bored by the tension he couldn't understand. He crouched to examine a crack in the pavement, tracing it with his finger as if it were a secret map. Daniel watched him, struck by how natural and trusting the movement was. Childhood carried a confidence adults spent lifetimes trying to recover. I never wanted him to grow up angry, she continued, her voice softer now. I wanted him to grow up safe. Stable. She glanced at Daniel. That meant building a life without uncertainty. Daniel nodded, absorbing the words like a lesson he had waited too long to learn. He had spent years believing success could replace presence, that providing from a distance was enough. Standing there now, he understood how wrong he had been. The boy suddenly looked up again. Mom, are we still going to school? He asked, concern creeping into his voice. Yes, she said immediately, kneeling to his level. You're not late. We're right on time. Right on time. The phrase landed differently for Daniel. Maybe time hadn't run out yet, maybe it was simply asking something of him now. He took a careful step forward, keeping his distance. I don't want to disrupt his life, he said honestly. But I don't want to walk away again either. She studied him for a long moment, weighing sincerity against history. Showing up, she said at last, isn't a promise. It's a practice. The words stayed with him as they began walking toward the gate, leaving Daniel standing in the courtyard, changed, challenged, and quietly determined not to repeat the same mistake twice. Daniel remained where he was long after they reached the gate. The taxi notification buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it. For the first time in years, business felt small. What mattered was the question echoing inside him. What kind of man shows up only when it's convenient? He followed them at a distance, not intruding, just observing. The boy skipped ahead, stopping to point at a bird perched on the fence, his excitement spilling freely into the morning. She smiled at him, patient and warm, the kind of smile built from countless small sacrifices. Daniel realized she had carried entire days like this alone. School mornings, questions, worries, while he had been celebrating milestones of a different kind. At the kindergarten gate, she knelt to straighten the boy's jacket again, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead. Go on, she encouraged softly. I'll be right here. The boy hesitated, then turned back. His eyes found Daniel across the courtyard. He waved, a simple gesture, unburdened by history. Daniel lifted his hand in return, feeling something inside him unlock. That small wave felt like an invitation, not to interfere but to become better. When she stood, she faced Daniel fully this time. If you want to be part of his world, she said quietly, it has to be for him, not for your conscience. Daniel nodded. I understand. I don't want to arrive with answers. I want to earn trust. She searched his face, looking past wealth, past reputation, to the man underneath. Then start small, she said. Consistency matters more than promises. As the gate closed behind the child, Daniel felt the weight of a responsibility he had never planned for, and a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He realized motivation wasn't about ambition alone. It was about choosing to rise to the moment life gives you, even when it rewrites everything you thought you knew. Days passed, but the moment refused to fade. Daniel found himself replaying it during meetings, during late dinners, during the quiet hours when the city lights blurred past his windows. Success had always given him momentum, yet now it felt directionless. For the first time, he questioned what all his achievements were meant to serve. He didn't rush back into their lives. Instead, he followed the advice he had been given, start small. He sent a message, brief and respectful, asking if he could help in any way that didn't disturb their routine. The reply came hours later, cautious but open. There were boundaries. There would be time. Trust would not be instant. Daniel accepted every condition without negotiation. He began by showing up when invited. Sometimes it was just a short walk after school, sometimes a quiet visit to the park where he sat on a bench and listened more than he spoke. The boy talked endlessly, about drawings, about friends, about big dreams that changed daily. Daniel never interrupted. He learned that presence was not about control, it was about attention. There were awkward moments. Questions he didn't yet have the right to answer. Silence that tested his patience. But he stayed. Each time he showed up, something shifted, subtle, almost invisible. A smile that lingered longer. A hand that reached for his without hesitation. Trust, he realized, was built the same way empires were not, slowly, quietly, without applause. One afternoon, as they walked home together, the boy looked up at him and said, "You always come when you say you will." The words struck deeper than any praise Daniel had ever received. He understood then that redemption wasn't a dramatic gesture. It was consistency repeated until doubt had no space left to grow. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt genuinely wealthy, not because of what he owned but because of the chance to become someone worthy of being remembered for the right reasons. Months later, Daniel stood once again in the same courtyard, but it no longer felt like a place of shock. It felt like a beginning. The seasons had changed and so had he. His days were still full, his responsibilities still heavy, but his priorities had shifted in ways no achievement ever had. He had learned that strength wasn't proven by control but by commitment. The boy ran ahead of them now, confident and carefree, turning back every few steps to make sure Daniel was still there. And Daniel always was. He had rearranged his world quietly, choosing meetings that could wait and moments that could not. No one applauded those choices but they reshaped him from the inside. She watched him from a short distance, noticing the changes he never announced. The patience, the way he listened, the way he showed up even when it was inconvenient. Trust had grown slowly between them, not as a return to the past, but as a respect for who each of them had become. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the buildings gold, the boy slipped his hand into Daniel's and said, "You didn't leave this time." Daniel felt his throat tighten, but he smiled. "I'm here," he replied. "And I plan to stay." In that moment, Daniel understood the true meaning of success. It wasn't found in titles, wealth, or recognition. It was found in responsibility accepted, mistakes corrected, and love earned through action. Life had offered him a second chance, not to rewrite the past but to shape the future. And as they walked forward together, Daniel knew that some moments don't just change your direction, they change who you are.